episode of Bluey is called Squash.
Oh, I'm gonna pound you.
Wait, what did he say?
I'm gonna pound you.
Bandit, I know you're not implying what I think you are, but that's kind of suspicious. So a while back, I was on a trip with my family, and while getting ready to go out, I was able to get dressed early, but had to wait a while for everyone else. And while waiting, I originally checked YouTube, but got bored, so I decided to fire up Disney Plus to watch some Bluey. But when browsing the episodes, I wanted something easy, but still entertaining, because as much as I love camping, that episode brings me a lot of feels I am not prepared to have in a hotel hallway. So after scrolling through everything they had, I eventually chose Squash, assuming that it would just be something fun to pass the time. And while I've seen this episode before, upon rewatching it, I have come to love it so much more than I was ever expecting. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about why I appreciate Squash so much, and how it's one of the most underrated episodes of the entire show. So without a further ado, let's get started. One aspect about Bluey that really makes it genuinely enjoyable are the stories, as more often than not, they have a good balance between being developed enough to be interesting, but also quick enough to keep things entertaining. And while it's not the most emotional or chaotic, I feel that Squash is a pretty good example of a solid Bluey episode for its plot alone. But to summarize, Bandit and his brother Stripe are going out to play squash together, with Bluey and Bingo helping the two compete against each other. And while it's simple fun at first, things begin to escalate when Bandit and Bluey beat Stripe and Bingo by a landslide, with Bandit boasting that Stripe will never beat him because he's the older brother.
Big brothers always beat little brothers.
But determined to prove him wrong, Bingo and Stripe get back to playing, and with some help from Bluey, quickly turn the tables around and defeat Bandit, making the game officially even. And realizing that he was wrong, Bandit and the others get back together, everyone has a good laugh, and then Bluey throws her dad into a bush, ending the episode on a comedic but warm note. So with that in mind, regarding why this story works so much, at least for me, there's a couple reasons why. But to start, the pacing in this episode is notably well done, and if I'm being honest, most Bluey episodes are pretty good with their pacing, but there are some that feel slow or uneventful, such as having things repeat over and over again with little or no progress. But to say the least, Squash is certainly not one of those episodes, and quite far from it, which to me is quite surprising because the idea of this episode is so simple, as it's mainly just about two dogs playing sports. But just like with many other episodes, the magic of Bluey is being able to take these simple concepts or games and make them an interesting, immersive story, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate this show so much. And of course, Squash also does something similar, as outside of an action-packed story about sports and competition, we also get plenty of interesting dynamics, such as the sibling rivalry between Bandit and his brother, the companionship between Bluey and Bingo, and also Bingo and Stripe's determination to beat Bandit. And not only is it fun to see the characters we know and love help and compete against each other, but we also get to see the reasoning behind their actions, with one notable example being Bingo, who doesn't just want to win, but simply prove Bandit's boasting wrong. So when Bingo and Stripe finally prove their point by winning, It is honestly one of the most satisfying moments of the entire show, as we've seen the two struggle, but earn what they fought for, as Bandit realizes his mistake, not only developing his character, but also teaching the viewers that little siblings can in fact beat big siblings. And as a result, we get a story that feels quick and action-packed to represent the chaotic nature of most sports, but also one with lots of feel-good moments, an exciting build-up, and a satisfying conclusion. I mean, it's not sleepy time levels of tear-jerking, but you gotta admit, that scene with Bingo and Stripe at the water fountain was a pretty heartwarming scene, and just a cherry on top of this episode's amazing story. Besides the story, another important aspect about Bluey that makes it so beloved and entertaining are the characters themselves. More often than not, it's the struggles and goals of these characters that drive the stories, such as having a character overcome a specific obstacle or understand something in a new way. And while there are plenty of reasons to like almost every character, one thing all of the most beloved characters share is a good mix between realism and likability. And I mention this because even though there are only 4 characters in Squash, they are all used surprisingly well in their own way, as each one has a different personality and role in the plot. But starting off, it's honestly pretty hard to say who exactly is the main character, but if I had to guess, I would say Bingo probably gets the most focus. After all, she does get the most shots, and I feel that her conflict is arguably the most important one, with her desire to prove Bandit wrong being given a lot of attention and driving the moral of the episode. And while it's really not that deep, I find her role really interesting because the episode uses tropes that have been done so many times before in the show, but executes them in a way that's a lot more interesting and satisfying. In fact, I didn't even realize they were using these tropes until I rewatched the episode, which really shows how well they were pulled off. And when I say tropes, there's this thing in the show where in most episodes, Bingo either does one and or 2 things. In episodes such as Fancy Restaurant, Kids, and plenty of others, she does play a role in the story, but acts as more of a supporting character who plays a minor role, such as being an assistant to Bluey or another character's shenanigans. And as seen in episodes such as Hotel, Bob Bilby, and Granny's, something happens to her that makes her upset, leading to Bluey and the others having to do something in order to make her happy. And interestingly, Squash presents both of these tropes to an extent, but they do it in a way that's not only entertaining, but also understandable. For instance, regarding her supportive side, we see her helping Stripe throughout almost the entire episode, and even refusing to leave him regardless of what happens, which is also a nice showcase of her loyalty.
You'll probably have a better chance of winning with your dad.
No, I want us to win.
And regarding her sensitive side, I'll admit that I usually don't like it when it's used, because in my opinion, most of her reasons for being upset are kind of ridiculous, such as being disappointed her grandmother couldn't floss. But to be fair, she is a young child, and there are some episodes where her feelings are justified, such as being intentionally left out in Butterflies. I mean, geez, that scene right there still gives me chills to this day. But going back to Squash, it's this justification that makes her role so good and understandable, rather than annoying and aggravating in some others. Because yeah, she does get disappointed when Stripe loses, and yeah, it does suck to lose such a great game, but I mean, Bandit and Bluey were just rubbing it in so much, to the point where it's physically painful, hence why Bingo's sadness is understandable. And unlike many other episodes, Bingo doesn't mope around waiting for the others to cheer her up, as in this episode, she's the one who wants to prove Bandit wrong, and she's the one who chooses not to give up and encourage Stripe to win, which I think is a nice touch compared to what we've seen before. And regarding how Bluey is used, I don't think her role is as interesting since she isn't really the focus, but the fact that she's the supporting character for Bingo when it's usually the other way around was fun to see play out. And yeah, Bluey was kind of mean to Bingo at first, with her agreeing with Bandit that big siblings always win, but she does quickly realize her mistake. And while on the subject of Bluey, I gotta mention that the scene with her trying to convince her dad to lose on purpose is honestly such a funny scene.
So can you?
Nope.
And speaking of Bandit, I'm just gonna come out and say that he was pretty dislikable in this episode, which hurts to say because he is my absolute favorite character. But to be fair, I can't hate it too much because it just kind of works, as the fact that his attitude annoys the viewer makes it so satisfying when he gets his comeuppance, and then learns that he was in fact wrong. And yes, he does get tortured like this in a lot of episodes, but for once, I'm totally okay with it because it's actually justified, and not just random pain inflicted on him for laughs. But regarding Uncle Stripe, his role is kind of the opposite of Bandit's. While I usually like Bandit but disliked him in Squash, I was honestly never a fan of Stripe, as he never really did anything interesting, but this episode was of course an exception. And to be fair, his role isn't as important as Bingo's, but he still serves as a good representation of the episode's morals, and seeing him struggle and get back up again with the help of Bingo was fun to watch, especially considering how he basically does next to nothing in most episodes. So congratulations, Uncle Stripe, you finally did something notable for once, and have therefore given me one reason to actually like you. Congratulations indeed. To be honest, there's not too much I can say about the animation, because let's be honest, saying that a Bluey episode has good animation isn't even a surprise. Almost every episode has good animation and art, but if there is anything I have to say, is that even though the entire episode takes place in a singular location, I will admit that the backgrounds are really well done as usual, with small details such as cobwebs in a corner or sunlight beaming over the glass-covered building, which is not only a good attention to detail, but makes everything genuinely pleasing to look at, and you can really tell that the artists had a blast working on this one. And for an episode with so much action, the movements are surprisingly fluid and the characters are really expressive, which helps the tone of the episode and really lets you see how the characters feel, even if they don't directly mention it like some other show. Similar to the animation, it's honestly not a huge surprise that the music in this episode is also really well made, but dang, they really hit it out of the park with this one. And what's genius about the soundtrack is that at the start of the episode, the music is nothing notable, but as the game gets more intense, the music follows by becoming more grand. For instance, when the game begins and everyone starts practicing, we just get this quirky, upbeat piece of music that matches the calm but exciting beginning. And honestly, it's okay, but not really that memorable. However, when the game really begins, the beat starts to slowly pick up, and we start getting more instruments. And by the end, it basically transitions into this epic, techno rock sounding piece that then evolves into this grand, orchestral piece that makes it sound like Stripe won the freaking Olympics. But in between, we also get this calm, sweet piano piece to match the more emotional moments of the episode, such as when Bingo is talking to Uncle Stripe at the water fountain. And if I'm being honest, I honestly know next to nothing about how music actually works, so for me it's kind of hard to describe, but if you really listen to the soundtrack, you'll find something that's pretty amazing. And the way this episode complements the story so well, it's unbelievable. I swear, the people who work on this are way more talented than anyone should be. But once again, it is one of many things that really make the show stand out from the pack. Man, when I first watched this episode, I knew this was at least decent, but I don't think I truly realized how well everything is done in this episode. Whether it was the entertaining story, the amazing usage of characters, the smooth animation, or just the perfect soundtrack across all of it. And while making this video, I've watched this episode at least 5 times, and I kid you not, every time I see it, I feel as if the episode is getting better because of how much there is to find and love about it. So if you haven't seen this episode, I highly recommend it, as in my opinion, this episode is probably one of the best ones out there. And the only reason I don't consider it the best is because I swear this show has created such a high bar with itself, as there have been plenty of other great episodes, such as Sleepy Time, Camping, and plenty of others. But unlike those episodes, I've seen Camping being talked about once in a while, I've seen every parent cry at Sleepy Time, and I've seen everyone love Baby Ray so freaking much. And while it's perfectly understandable because those episodes are amazing, I really don't see anyone talking about how great this one is. Except for Bentendo. He actually picked this one as his best episode of Season 2 a couple months ago, so kudos to him. And honestly, I actually saw his video and thought it was a really weird choice at first, but now that I've rewatched this episode, I completely understand where he's coming from. But anyways, what do you think? Is this episode some sort of hidden masterpiece, or am I just losing my mind over some nonsense? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. But until next time, I'm afraid it's time for me to say goodbye because the video is officially over. B&B Productions will be signing out. Have a great day everyone, and I'll see you real soon.